The Fossores Chapter House is the world's first headquarters for Christian ministerial innovation, bringing preachers, leaders, and innovators together to collaborate on new liturgies, resources, and responses to the challenge of our times. This podcast explores the ever-changing era of perpetual upheaval, in which effective ministry requires constant imagination, creativity, and change.
Well, hey everybody, thanks for being with us in Chapter House Podcast. I'm joined by my new friend, Dr. Andrew Fox. Andrew, why don't you tell everybody where you're from? And Ryan, you are going to join us. Be careful. Perfect. Be careful of that chair because he already dumped himself once. You're good. You're good. You look comfortable. If you go down, just make sure that all the F words are in English.
Well, you know when you're rippling with muscle like me, the chair can't always take it. So what can I tell you? What was your question, Dave? Tell me again.
Yeah, well, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
So I am the glorious husband of my wife, but joking apart, I serve...
You're not married? You're not married to your wife?
No. I'm
Who is married to your wife?
I'm the husband of my wife, but I'm not that glorious. I guess there are four buckets that would summarize me, Dave. So the first one would be clergy. So I serve as the lead chaplain for the Austin Fire Department, over 1,300 uniformed personnel. I'm the pastor, which is a lot of fun and very, very different than typical stereotype traditional ministry. The second one is academics. Got a bunch of degrees which don't mean anything. They just get you into the room, but they don't keep you in the room. So education. And then business. I'm the owner of Fox Realty. My wife is the broker. We've got a team of real estate agents working for us. That's a great way to serve your community and pays very well. And then finally, I do some writing, blogging. I thoroughly enjoy the writing process and producing literature. So they're the four buckets that I dive into that give me meaning for life, purpose, and cash flow at the same time.
Well, that's nice. That's nice. And Ryan, good to have you back. You did a podcast with us. It was you and I, Rodriguez, talking about fitness.
Fitness, yes.
Yeah.
And we also discussed other things, human-related. Penis worms, I think, was...
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's good. That's
Yeah.
good. I'll have to go back.
You
and
actually
listen to
said that. I'm going to tell your wife.
She heard it.
Oh, really?
She laughed.
Well, if
When we talked
then
about
Herod the Great.
Herod the
probably.
Great, yeah.
That really sticks out of my mind. That's a detail. I mean, that's the only penis worm I've ever heard of.
I've never heard anybody say it that way before, but you nailed it.
Oh man. So well, just refreshing in case they missed that glorious episode. Let everybody know who you are and what you do.
My name is Ryan Grinnell. I am the director of the Fire Academy for Austin Community College in Austin, Texas. I also own the Camper Connection Bastrop, Texas branch, and we are a camper consignment company. Owners
like
of
Airbnb for campers.
It's an Airbnb on wheels. People that own RVs are normally store them throughout the year, and so this way they put them in our program. They earn money while they're not, using it themselves.
Yeah.
So I'm also the chaplain of the Austin, Texas chapter of Faith RX'd.
Yeah.
Enjoy that, and I do writing for them as well.
Yeah.
I've been a firefighter for over 21 years now.
Wow.
Off shift into the director role of the academy, so I get to grow this patchwork beard as I'm working on the grays like you are, and
Well,
I don't hide them like.
You can't have a beard if you're a firefighter?
No, you've got to be able to have a good face piece seal.
You were just about to say that you don't hide them like me.
Yeah, you should let the gray show. It really looks good on you.
I just pray to God my Father, and my gray turns to brown. That's all I can say.
Why?
Why? You're losing wisdom when that happens. That's biblical, my friend.
Somebody's talking, Dave, and I can't hear them. What else did you have to say? Somebody's just talking wah, Charlie Brown right now.
Since you both work in chaplaincy, let's start with chaplaincy. For those who don't know, a chaplain is somebody who functions pastorally outside of a church. So usually what that means is that they do pastoral counsel, visitation, providing comfort, spiritual direction, friendship, for a particular group of people in a particular vocational context. So if you're a chaplain to nurses, you'd hang out at the hospital. If a nurse was having a rough day, you'd be there to pray with him or her, offer them biblical wisdom. You might appropriately stay in contact with them and their families outside of work hours just to check up on them, make sure that they know they're loved and cared for, and have a place to ask spiritual questions. You've been a chaplain for firefighters. You've been a chaplain for athletes, and also in the military. Weren't you a military chaplain when you were in the Air Force?
No, just a firefighter.
Yeah, okay.
Just a firefighter.
Yeah, just a firefighter.
Yeah.
Well, that's not dangerous or heroic at all. Not without a beard.
Just ask us. We'll tell you. We're heroes. I'm just
for
kidding.
my service. Yeah. And then I've been a chaplain for college athletes and local athletes too. So, what's been the most rewarding part about chaplaincy?
For me, it is building the equity of trust. Is in church life, you have a pulpit, you have position, you have a regular audience every Sunday, and they're going to listen to what you say. You have regular people to care for. But if you strip away all of that construct and you are just a pastor to people without that framework, what I really enjoy is that stripping away, and it's on your own merit. Yeah. It's not because you got the name tag on your door or your desk or your parking space. You don't have any of that as a fire chaplain. So I enjoy earning the equity of trust and where that leads you. So sometimes that can take years. But once you earn that trust, of course, it's then maintaining and keeping that trust.
So, 1,300 firefighters, you don't hang out at the fire halls. How do they get to know you? How do they know
who
the
I do.
chaplain is?
No, I do. I go from fire station to fire station and spend a few hours there. And I think, as Ryan will tell you, one of the differences in church life, chaplaincy with the fire department as well, is the language that is used. I don't necessarily mean cussing and swearing. All I mean is when you're cussed out and when they swear at you and when they say sarcastic things to you, that in itself is a form of affection. Sure. It's a form of inclusion. Mm-hmm. So you don't get that on a Sunday morning for sure, but you do with firefighters. So you go from fire station to fire station, you keep building trust, consistency, and the more rude people are to you, the more accepting they are.
What's the best thing that you've ever heard? What the best, most lovingly derogatory comments that you've ever gotten?
Oh, to do with being English, to do with, I don't know, being English, sexual connotations, body size, phallus comparing, all that.
Talking about the worms?
All that goes. The penis worm came up again. All of those things. But I think the genuine most rewarding thing is when a firefighter says, "You know what, chaplain, when I die, I want you to do my funeral."
Oh yeah, sure.
That is a bullseye right there. Yeah. Which nobody likes to think about, obviously, somebody dying. But that's that equity of trust again.
Yeah. What about for you? What's been the most rewarding stuff about being a chaplain?
The most rewarding for me in doing it in the athlete arena, if you will, is having the same background as the athletes do when they just want to come in, they want to be fit, but having an avenue for them to build a relationship with people within the fitness community. Yeah. Not a lot of areas like fire department, police department, professions like that have chaplains, but there aren't a lot of opportunities for CrossFit athletes to dive in and have somebody to build that relationship with. So my wife and I being a part of that has been rewarding because we get to meet people and they open up to us and talk to us, and we get to build that bridge with them on the basis of fitness. Yeah. That's just the foundation that's laid. Yeah. So I love to build relationships with people. I'm a people person. That's what I love to do. Yeah. But speaking about Christ and going into those kind of things and relating it to fitness, because as we talked last time, fitness is so parallel with our walk with Christ. There is no growth without resistance, and that's part of it when we can tie the word into the workout. We're not doing burpees to bow down to the honor of God when we do
burpees. You cannot mention the word burpees.
See, it's just sacrilegious.
That's an evil word, burpees.
So I enjoy working with my wife in it because she's the lead coach of our chapter, and she gets to program the workouts, and I get to bring the word, and we work together, and it fits.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I confess I always feel really awkward in a chaplaincy role. I was first a chaplain for the men's basketball team at a large school back home in Canada, big 20, 30,000 student university, and the way people would treat me as a chaplain was just so weird for me. Like I was an office, not a human. And so I mean, I remember just even people calling you chap. Like that's the weirdest thing. You're like, hey, I'm Dave McDonald, I'm the chaplain here. Oh, great to meet you, chap. And you're like, oh, that's kind of funny. But then, where's the chap? Where's the chap? And then they treat you almost like an ATM, which is just really weird. Like, hey, I need to know a Bible verse for keeping my cool in this game. It starts in 5 minutes. And you're like,
Did you wear a clerical collar when you were chaplain?
No. I didn't. Well, back then, I didn't think you could be a Christian if you wore a clerical collar. I was like, that's papism,
Because what you're talking about with apparel, with fire chaplaincy, if you're wearing that stuff, you are male, you're not man. You are.
Or you get neutered.
You Doc, you're Fox, you're like I say chaplain, but you're not Andrew. So yeah. But I think for me that goes with the apparel that you wear. You take that off, and then you become Andrew.
See, that was always a big thing for me in ministry. My dad, who I greatly respect, he passed away, this last year, and I just think he's the most godly man I've ever met in my entire life. I mean, I've seen him in every circumstance, and I never, not one single time, felt disappointed or disabused of my father. He was so godly, and a wonderful dad, great dad. But he only ever went by the term pastor. So, he wasn't Pastor Gordon, he wasn't Pastor McDonald, he was just pastor. If we went out for dinner, the waitresses called him pastor. He was a function. And now he felt really strongly about that. That was his calling, that was his identity, that's who he wanted to be. He was pastor. I don't ever want anybody to call me pastor.
Yeah.
I'm Dave, or David, David if, I have to be fancy. And I don't know how much of that is differentiating from my father, which is healthy, or how much of that is seeing at least what I perceive to be some of the wounds of my father in ministry, where he didn't have great friendships, at least from the outside. Now maybe he didn't need them, but he certainly wasn't. He never took a boys trip. And so I was that could be my own father, but that drove me crazy. When people sort of reduce you to a function, but you like it.
Well, I mean, in a paramilitary organization, you for instance, the death of a firefighter, that's extremely, ceremonial, ritual, rites of passage, how much brass you're wearing on your collar, what does your uniform say? And there's graduations of cadets that, the first entrance is what Ryan deals with, and then they'll go to, further heights as cadets, then they graduate. And the cadets, again, rank and file. It's like standing in front of a bunch of white dressed stormtroopers. Right. Everything's uniform and the same. I don't mean white in terms of ethnicity, but just the Star Wars figure.
We've seen Star Wars. Yeah.
And you're like the Darth Vader, or you're like the actually you're like the Jedi, but not you.
You're not like the Jedi. No. You're more like the Sith Lord.
You're like the garbage can.
Yeah,
So,
you come across in that role very well.
So, and then you, and then you're at a fire station, and then they see beyond that apparel that you're wearing. And so when guys invite you into their lives, and we track our activity, Dave, so, we're very data driven as well. And so the main things that we deal with outside of the job is domestic life, sex, marriage, teenage children, blended families, and the occasional slap on the face that happens in the home. So we deal with a lot of that, and you got to take a lot to the grave with you. It's that equity of trust again. If somebody's trusting you with their personal life, then you have to handle that in a very, very priestly manner,
Sure.
And of course, our policy, like everyone else is, you know, if there's threat to life, then we have to report that. But outside of that, you could tell me you like to put a dress on a Friday night and dance around like a little tutu, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But you're going to be on YouTube at some point, and people will be laughing at you. But, you know, that's private. You know, and so, you know, there's no offering involved. There's no hymn singing. There's no, you know what I mean? There's nothing of that involved. So, tell you what I have noticed though is when you're out in a restaurant or with your family or you're out and about, you're always seen. Somebody's always watching you.
Oh yeah.
And if you turn around and bark at your wife or you have a little road rage or something, Murphy's Law, someone's there, someone's watching it.
Yeah.
And then next time you're at a fire station, someone will bring it up.
Yeah.
And of course they'll mock you for it. So,
Yeah.
but that's a form of affection. So it's a very different role than as you described your dad.
Yeah. Do you find it easy? Do you feel like you ever lose your personal identity in the context of the vocation?
No, because unlike Dr. Fox, he's inundated in it every day, and he's building the relationships with those people every single day. Unfortunately, I only get to see my athletes once a month, and it's so it's a lot less in depth in relationships like he is.
Yeah.
But we do build the relationships. I don't lose my identity going into it, because it's more of building the trust, but building relationships and friendships within the fitness in the gym that we're in. So it's a little easier for me. His is much more intensive.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, when this man puts on that uniform,
Yeah.
he wears it well.
I look like a sexy beast.
Just
a sexy Jedi beast.
Yes.
You look like a tin of biscuits.
That would be a private joke.
I also include in my own estimation of chaplaincy the chaplaincy side of pastoral ministry, hospital visitations, home visitations, weddings and funerals. Those all kind of go into a lump for me of the stuff that a parish priest would do, and stuff that's outside of my comfort zone and outside of my gifting. I mean, I've done hundreds of weddings, and sometimes I really enjoy those. I've done maybe 50 funerals, and I always feel quite honored to do those. You know, that's a very holy time. Hospital visitations are, all right, I mean, if I ever show up to see you in the hospital, that means I love you more than Jesus does, because I hate going to the hospital.
Yeah.
It doesn't creep me out. It doesn't freak me out. I just hate it. I also hate watching baseball on TV. I hate asparagus. I mean, I just hate going to the hospital. It drives me nuts. Or home visitations, sitting down having tea with somebody or coffee or something with somebody in their house, or eating their bunt cake and looking at their pictures. I mean, I just, I might pass out right now from the horror.
Bunt cake.
Yeah. You don't have bunt cake? Is that a Canadianism?
No, we have bunt cake.
That's a my big fat Greek wedding line. You know, it's a bunt cake.
Yeah.
You have to watch that movie to get
No,
what
I've seen it. Yeah, but when they get baptized in the Orthodox Church in the turtle pool or whatever. Yeah.
There you go.
So what about you guys? I find that's what people often want me to perform those functions, and again, I think my wiring and my gifting are not especially complementary to that. But I also realize those things are really important. So I say yes a lot more to those things than I say no to, at least weddings and funerals. But what about you? Is it satisfying, meaningful, fulfilling?
Well, I do think there's a shift in being invited into someone's personal home. I mean, I get what you're saying. When I was in England, I was doing all of that, hospital visits, people's homes, and you they treat you as an extension of the family, and you're supposed to come across with all the correct mannerisms that go with it. But with the younger generation today, I don't find that pastoral ministry is invited into someone's personal home or apartment, especially in the big cities. Meeting people on Zoom for sure. FaceTiming, meeting in a neutral place for a cup of coffee.
That's the heft of it.
Yeah, but my home and their home, I think for a younger generation is becoming more and more private. So I don't know what you feel, Ryan, but I guess that's how I view it now.
Now, we're in Jackson, Michigan, where I've been pastoring since 2005. Is a small, rust bucket town in the Midwest. You know, we suffer still from the closure of the Detroit auto industry and all the associated factories, and so the Midwestern mindset has got some pretty antiquated expectations for pastors. And our church is about 1,000 people, and still I have people at my church with that many people that I go, I can't believe my pastor hasn't ever, doesn't ever come over to my house and just see me. And I'm like, how? Like, that is such a crazy expectation. How could I possibly do that? I couldn't do that for 100 people.
Yeah.
How could I do that for 1,000 people?
Yeah.
Which it just, and it always startles me that even young people. That's what made me think of that as I go.
Maybe more small town.
Yeah, right.
Approach there. But when I moved to the States, there was a lot of traditions with the Pastoral Office that are not there in Great Britain. For instance, you have Pastors Appreciation in October.
Yeah.
And I mean, the tradition of that goes back to that was end of harvest time, and pastors didn't get paid much, so people who worked the land, they would give their pastor food parcels, bags of potatoes and things like that, tie them over for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Now it's turned into Pastors Appreciation. You better preach your best sermons that time of year. You better go visit everyone, Dave, you don't want to visit, and then you get a nice tidy check. And so the traditions that were there have turned into something else today. And I think the same for pastoral visitation. Smaller towns, parish mentality, there's that expectation. But I think in the bigger cities, no.
Yeah, no. Right. Yeah, I don't know that we had that expectation when I was in Vancouver or when I was working in Oklahoma City. That was different. Yeah. It's a trip because I think of Paul's writing in about the fivefold in Ephesians. That some are pastors, some are prophets, some are evangelists, some are what am I missing?
Teachers,
apostles, and some are teachers. Yeah, and I think that pastoral shepherding work is a particular kind of calling. We need more pastor shepherds. We need way more pastor shepherds because the burden upon paid pastor shepherds is huge. I mean, we do a lot with pastors here in town, and of course I train pastors all over the country, and it's common that per paid shepherd, you've got 250 to 300 people that rely on them for 100% of their sort of spiritual therapy, and I go, well, that's not a sustainable model. That's not necessarily a biblical model. And that eats pastors up, and that's why they flame out so quickly. As you go, you can't do all of that for that many people and be healthy. We need normal Christians to step up and to pastor one another as peers, as brothers and sisters in the body of Christ, instead of always looking to the pros.
Yep. But I think that office has become institutionalized as well. In the larger churches, you got, the pastor of children, the pastor of music, the pastor of setting out chairs, the pastor of emptying trash cans. Everyone's a pastor. And I think the bar has been lowered a little bit, one of the observations from UK to US where, entrance level to be a pastor is a career. It's actually a calling, before it is a career, before you get that parking space and name tag and all of those things. And the true shepherd is, you got to go back to the text, is feed my lambs, feed my sheep. You be a shepherd of God's people, not because you must, but because you're willing.
What's funny about that though is, as you're talking and you say all that stuff, I realize, which I realized before, I've never felt like a good pastor. I'm a pastor's kid. I got ordained when I was I got commissioned to be a pastor when I was 19. I got ordained when I was 21. I've got degrees and experience coming out the wazoo. I still don't feel like a good pastor. I just haven't quit yet. And I think, you get, when you're in pastoral ministry, and I feel loved and appreciated by our congregation, but often it's, we love you, Dave, or we love you, thanks, Pastor, we love you, thanks for doing that, that was so great. But if you get a bunch of that every Sunday, it still doesn't counterbalance when somebody says, you're supposed to be my pastor. Why couldn't you do that? You're telling me you're too busy, you can't, and you're like, oh my gosh, one of those comments puts a knife in your heart that really never gets out. And you have to, for me, a big part of my spiritual life is to say, Lord, I got this wound, and they're right. I am a disappointment. I am a failure in these ways. I'm not holy enough. I'm not available enough, and I just got to go. But you've called me to do it nonetheless, so I'm going to keep going. But after, 26, 27 years in ministry, whatever it is, I don't know how old I am. I don't know how long I've been doing it. A long time. Let's call it 8 years, and the rest can be for free. But I go, after all that, you just keep going, Lord, I'm just not going to quit. I'm just not going to turn it in.
Yeah.
I love you. You've called me to this. This is my calling.
So that's the fulfillment. You not because you must, but because you're willing. It's not a career for you. It's a calling.
Yeah.
And the amount that I know you, Dave, you are a good pastor. The way you.
A lot of people who don't know me well think that.
Well, the way you embrace, the way you physically embrace people and verbally embrace people in these few days that we spent together, it's admirable. You are a pastor, but I do think there's an illusion to it as well.
Yeah.
And I think the illusion can be a distraction. The illusion of having all the answers, the illusion of having a capacity to love everyone.
Sure.
I remember when I was pastoring in Washington State, I would frequently go to God and say, God, give me the love. I don't have it. I don't have capacity for all these people all the time. Give me the love. And, that institutional thing kicks in when the love leaves. So you then at your office for a certain amount of hours, you're punching the card kind of thing. And then you've just lost, not because you must, but because you're willing.
Yeah.
And so I think part of the tension the pastors feel is part of the calling. And if you don't have that tension, if you don't have that tension, then I will really question whether you're really a pastor.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fascinating. The tension could be. I always look at the tension not as part of the calling, but as that's my spiritual journey. That's how God's refining me. God's saying, Dave, through the disappointment, through the recognition that you're not enough, that you got to rely on me, that no matter what you do, if they hated me, they're going to hate you too. I mean, through all that process just keeps me drawing deeply on the Holy Spirit and saying, okay, Lord, I'm giving you everything I got, and it's not enough, so you're going to have to make up the difference, and I'm mad about it, and I'm humiliated by it, so you're going to have to heal me. And I think I'm a Christian still because I'm a pastor. Like that if I didn't have the constant frustrations and the constant wound, the constant anxiety or burden of pastoral ministry, I would not rely on Jesus anywhere near enough. Yeah. If I was just doing academic work, if I was just a professor, if I was just even a chaplain, it would be so much easier for me to love people less, ignore people more, and exclude people I don't like or that constantly hurt me from my life. But because God's called me into the ministry, then you're just surrounded by fiends, but
Yep.
And it's precisely those thorns that keep my spirit growing roses.
Yeah.
And
Don't you think though that the community of years ago is not the community of today, and that affects the
in church community, you mean?
the community at large is
Like
not
the culture. You mean?
Yeah, I mean that. It was something years ago to say I am an American. I don't think we can say that today. There's been so many shifts that I don't want to get into it too much, but the big divide, the lack of civil dialogue. People have changed, and that will impact the pastor's persona, ministry.
Sure.
It's not just people he's pastoring those people that have changed over the years to become this or that. So
well, the internet certainly has made people freer and more acerbic with their opinions.
Yeah.
Because we've lost. What is it Mike Tyson said?
Everybody's got a game plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Yeah, and you're when you're behind a keyboard, you're really brave.
Yes.
But when you know that the guy right in front of you is going to punch you in the mouth if you shoot your mouth off, then you're a lot more cautious with your words. And I think what we're seeing now, everybody got real screen brave there for a long time as everybody retreated into their little ghettos, and they could be keyboard warriors and fire off really mean things, both on the right and on the left. But now a lot of those people are coming together in real life with 15 years of practice being mean and 15 years of no practice being civil. And now when they show up face to face, they're not only ready for a fight, they're itching for one.
Yeah.
And I just go, the call of God upon the Christian church is to love your enemy, to bless those that curse you, to pray for those that persecute you. And I don't see a lot of liberal Christians doing that to conservatives, and I don't see a lot of conservative Christians doing that to liberals, and I don't see a lot of liberal Christians and conservative Christians that believe the other guys are Christians. It's crazy. I go like, we're right back to the beginning of why the New Testament was written. This is how men will know you by my disciples, by your love for one another. I mean, come on, church, we gotta stop. You know, I mean, I'm thinking now that we're coming, you know, that COVID is, that the apocalypse is over, and we're all coming out from under our rocks, and we've lived through the book of Revelation. now that it's all over, I'm thinking, how do we pastor our people and broker healing and reconciliation? And I think two messages are really important. I'm sorry, and thank you. Like I look as a pastor, you know, and our church is roughly split, you know, 50-50 left and right. And I look at the way the left-wing Christians behaved. You know, the how could you, why don't you consider the weaker brother? You're not wearing masks. You're so callous. You're evil. You don't love people. Jesus would never do that. I mean, just so brutal. And then I look at the right-wing Christians who are going, you sissies, you pansies, you fearmongers, you gave in to empire. God didn't give us a spirit of fear. You're running around like sheeple. And I go, both of y'all need to say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I said while I was in you know,
quarantine.
Revelation 19.
Yeah.
And both groups also need to say, thank you. You know what? You know what? For the times when you articulated your position in love and you restrained yourself from vitriol.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think another response really needs to be even deeper than that. And it's, maybe I was wrong.
Yeah.
Because that really opens up the pride aspect of it.
Yeah,
because
right.
if you look at it now, and it goes back to what you're saying both about congregations, we're a culture of consumer Christianity.
Yeah.
And pastors are there to equip, they're there to train, they're there to feed, but ultimately it's the congregation's responsibility to take what you're giving them and go apply it.
Yeah.
It's not the pastor's job to walk with me to work and say, remember what we talked about Sunday? Yeah. Well, guess what? I got your podcast. I can listen to it throughout the week, but ultimately I have to do it.
Yeah.
And the same thing, the consumer mindset is not going to say, man, maybe I was wrong. Because we can take anything back to any store now and say, you were wrong, give me another one. No questions asked. Same thing in our hearts. If we don't say, maybe I was wrong, I'm sorry doesn't mean anything. Thank you really doesn't mean anything. Before my wife and I got married 21 years ago, wow. The one thing I remember our pre-marriage counselor saying was, don't say I'm sorry, because that's such a canned statement and it's so impersonal. He said,
you're talking to a Canadian right now. That's all we say. Sorry.
But he said, don't say that, because there's nothing behind it. Rather, ask for forgiveness. Because when you ask for forgiveness, that opens up your heart to say, good. I messed up.
That's good.
But it also puts the ball in your court to say, or in her court to say, I forgive you. There's been a lot of...
Jill really needs to ask for my forgiveness.
Yeah, it's been a lot of asking for forgiveness from her. There has been some, I forgive you, and there's been some, we'll talk later.
So back to your point, Dave, coming out of COVID, the apocalypse, I'm sorry and thank you. And to Ryan's point, you know,
please forgive me.
Yeah, please forgive me. He's, you know, and I know I'm biased in this, completely biased, but God has given us a Thanksgiving table to come to. And
I wonder how long it was going to take for you to circle something to the Eucharist.
Oh, yeah, I did the Eucharist. I mean, it's like, it's my research, it's my passion. I have seen the supernatural happen at communion. You cannot predict it, you cannot guarantee it, but you can say it's probable, because God is a merciful God. And, you know, I think if we come to the table of the Lord, that some people say has no head, you know, it's a round table, figuratively speaking, everyone is welcome. and we take the bread and we remember the body of Christ, the ultimate sacrifice for us, remember his blood, the forgiveness, the forgive me kind of thing. In that moment, the Holy Spirit can do a work in our congregations right across the country. If we again, probability, no guarantees, but if we break bread, what God could do in stripping back the hostility and reapproaching the humility of being at the cross again.
Okay, so I do want to talk about this a little bit, because we circled around the Eucharist a bunch over the last few days. We had you administered a Eucharistic service in the front of the chapter house at the big feasting table we have out in front of the community, which was so cool. And we followed the liturgy out of the Anglican Book of Common Prayer, right?
Yep,
where we were, we recited the Nicene Creed, the Lord's Prayer, we exchanged common prayer, which was a great testimony for me. I mean, I love showing the chapter house to the community as kind of a holy haunted house, it's so fun. But of course, the Eucharist starts as the Passover meal, the Seder supper.
Yeah.
And our Eucharistic liturgies today don't look like that. And the closest analogy that I can think of culturally in America to the Seder is Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah.
But communion doesn't feel like Thanksgiving dinner either. Mm. And so for me, one of the things that I think I've made my peace with is the things we do today are not what they did then. And we've ritualized and sacralized certain aspects of what they did then incorrectly and historically unfaithfully. However, I still think they're powerful.
Yeah, so I'm not Jewish, I'm Gentile, so I can be a guest at a Passover, and I can enjoy the 7 cups of wine. I can enjoy all of that. I'd be really enjoying it by the 7th cup of wine, but we're not Jewish, we're Gentile, and I think sometimes we can impose the complexity of Passover into the simplicity of communion, which ultimately points towards do this. Every time you do it, you proclaim it till the Lord comes again.
Yeah, but the liturgy we did yesterday. I'm Pentecostal. That was the most complicated communion I ever been in.
Yeah. So I was raised in Assembly of God Pentecostal all my life.
Yeah.
Over the past decade, I've had a great appreciation for liturgy because, as people felt, and as they said afterwards around the table, especially when it came to communal prayer, for my son, for my daughter, Lord, hear our prayer. It's that response of, we don't know your son, but Lord, hear our prayer for his son. What that does to the person saying, for my son, you and I don't know, but we can imagine they are lifted in their heart because others are with them.
Yeah.
And sometimes we just need a vehicle instead of the splish splash Holy Spirit, just guide us, lead us. It's like a plane with no engine on the wind.
I enjoyed it as well. What I was responding to was you saying that as a Gentile, I don't have to make it as complicated as a Seder supper for the Jews. But as a Gentile, you just made it complicated in a different direction.
Well, to be honest, it's, I don't know the people around the table. I'm not their pastor. They're not my congregation. And yet we can do this. So we need some formalizing and authenticity, because your whole chapter house, it fits in with the authenticity. It's the ancient future Robert Webber kind of thing that he talked about years ago. But I do think the Passover, communion, and the eschatological, wedding supper of the Lamb, they frame the story of God.
Oh, that's a great,
and that's what we're going to look at.
But wait, you don't start in the garden? You wait till the Passover?
Well, it depends N.T. Wright, Walter Brueggemann, many others have framed things different ways that do start in the garden. Some start before the garden.
But the first command in the Scripture, eat freely.
Yeah.
The very first thing, eat freely. So it starts with a meal.
But
last command in the Scripture, drink freely. All of human history in the presence of the divine is a buffet.
It is. There's always a table, there's always food, and there's always God.
Yeah.
Food and drink and God.
Yeah.
But for me, in the postmodern context we live in, especially with late millennials and Gen Z, we need to frame this thing called the Bible that is not what we. The Bible's not what we want it to be.
Right, but you start.
So we got to frame it some way, and so one way of many ways of framing it is you take David's statement. You prepare a table for me.
Yeah.
God's always done that.
Yeah, in the presence of my enemies.
Yeah, he's always done that. Let's start at Passover. Yeah, we can start before, but let's start there. There was an oppressor. There were the oppressed.
Well, that's a good gospel.
There was God and the deliverer.
Yeah.
And so for people who've never cracked open the Bible, who've never understood the Bible, to
Oppression,
frame it that way, it's a repeated drama of four major characters that goes from Egypt and Israel to a cosmic level, God and the devil, and a final level where the devil is bound in chains and thrown away forever. And those who never found justice in this life, the first thing they hear at that final table is, "Well done, my good and faithful servant."
Yeah.
So you frame the Bible that way. For me, it's building an appetite for how to approach the Bible.
Sure. Now,
It's just one of many ways.
Yeah. Okay. No, I was wondering why you lobotomized so much of the first part of the Bible, but that makes sense. Just as a rhetorical device to start with injustice and oppression, and because that's the starting place for everybody these days.
Everyone understands oppression.
Yeah, everyone, and it's quite comforting to know that the Bible addresses it and addresses it holistically and repeatedly. All right, here's what I love, because we didn't get to this at all, but in Jewish mystical literature, at the final feast in the presence of God in the place of the patriarchs, when there's the precursor of the marriage supper of the Lamb in Jewish mythology, there are 3 meats served. You eat the flesh of God's cosmic enemies, Leviathan, the sea monster, Behemoth, the earth monster, and Ziz, the great mythological bird that tormented the writers in the Jewish prophetic tradition. And so that's what you eat in heaven, which I just think is so great. That's so awesome.
You think that's going to be on the table at the...
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, I doubt it. Who knows? I haven't been dead yet, but when I do, I hope that there's a barbecue like that. I mean, I'm fascinated by Leviathan, and so I want to know what he looks like, and I'm really excited to find out what he tastes like.
Well,
that seems so...
Whatever we eat, John definitely framed it in a Jewish wedding.
Yeah.
That was his context. And so we know... In the Gentile world, a wedding is 30 minutes, an hour if you're Catholic. But in eternity, in a Jewish wedding, it can last up to 2 weeks. But
maybe that's why people say there's no sex in heaven, is because the marriage supper of the Lamb lasts forever. So like, let's get this over with, bro. You know how long it's been? I've been waiting for this.
Yeah. But here's the cool thing: at Passover, there is the lamb's blood.
Yeah.
At communion, there is the lamb's blood.
Yeah.
And at the eschatological table, there is the redeemed that have been washed and clothed by the blood of the Lamb. There's commonalities between these 3 tables.
And the Lamb is wounded. He's received a mortal wound, but not yet died. And the Lamb has, 7 horns and a fistful of eyes. And the Christ Lamb in Revelation is a horror almost, but a beauty and a majesty also, because here's this lamb that you just can't kill.
So keep hold of that thought.
Yeah.
Churches right across America coming out of COVID, hostilities, you got communion. It looks back historically to say, I remember the cross. But it looks back further than that to say, to your Genesis point, I remember how things used to be before sin came. Yeah. But then it looks forward to the coming of Christ and proclaiming his death until he comes, and the great hope that we have of justice for everyone, which is a huge issue of these absolute wars between people. I'm right, no, I'm right, no, you're right, no, I'm right, so communion is the neutralizer, and it creates the space and the time for God to inhabit, to do whatever God wants to do, which is none of my business.
Yeah. I mean, I would like it to be. Often it's not, but I do like the promise, or at least the aspiration of communion to be that. I mean, theologically, I can say that's what it means. Practically, I've been in so many thousands of communion services that were perfunctory and empty.
Yes.
Not for everybody, but
Yeah.
certainly for a giant population. I would say there's a great, as we think about COVID, the Exodus is a great way to reflect upon it, because life after COVID is different. I mean, we're not going back to the way things used to be. People are always, people are on high alert now. Business is different now. Culture and economy is different now. Personal space, social distancing, that's all different. That's different forever. It's never going to go back to the way it was 2 years ago. But when the people of God were liberated from Exodus at the Passover, and they left in the middle of the night, they took all their stuff with them. It wasn't just the Israelis that were freed.
No, it was others.
Right. And
Yeah.
I think that's amazing to imagine these other people, whoever they were, the other, Moabites, Edomites, whoever they are, trying to learn how to be with the people of God in the new reality. I go, that's a great metaphor for trying to figure out how do you get Democrats and Republicans to learn to be together as the new people of God after COVID. Like, we didn't get along there. Now we have to get along.
Well, I think one response to that is a very dangerous one, is that they had the law of God, or they did after they came away from Mount Sinai. They had the law of God, and so that could be one answer to how did they get along. They had God's ways.
Well, sorta.
It's dangerous to talk like that, but that's one thing they had.
They sort of had them, and then they sort of broke them, and then they...
Yeah, you don't want to legalize the whole thing.
Yeah, cooked up a cow and made an idol, and then God killed a bunch of them with some plagues. There's...
Well, actually, Dave,
shared suffering is
he killed all the worship leaders, actually, the sons of Korah. I mean, that's the whole subject in itself.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it, too, is now, after COVID, now that we're free, now that we've been liberated, if you speak against the people of God, God will kill you. He won't.
But I think it goes back the coming to the Eucharist and getting the Democrats and the Republicans to come together and live as the people of God.
Yeah.
It comes down to the repentant heart.
Yeah.
You have to say, I was wrong, Lord. When we did that the other day, you do it in remembrance of Christ. I can't take a communion without remembering where I was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And so if we don't look through the rear view and be reminded of where we were, then we're never moving forward and looking out the windshield. Yeah. You set your eyes on things in front of you. So fix your eyes on Christ.
You've got to officiate it like that. The one presiding over it has got to realize what is happening in our time right now and officiate from that context. And so, sometimes the vehicles of liturgy and high church stuff, it helps, and other times it doesn't. That's down to the officiate to navigate that all the way through. But the arguments historically have been over these symbols of bread and wine, or these species of bread and wine. Do they transform or don't they transform? And I think the argument is a wrong question. It's not, do they transform? It's, do I transform? Yeah. What happens in me? Is there any transubstantiation in my life? Not the bread and the wine. If you leave it to the bread and wine, it becomes like, hocus pocus, and we've lost the plot.
But I don't know. That could be my Canadian background. Could be, but I've never had anybody wonder about transubstantiation.
Not in Pentecostal circles, no.
Well, no, but now I'm in a non.
But in your heart, yeah.
That's a great. I mean, for a more.
The addict,
Lutheran,
the one who's suffering with deep depression or anxiety, or any other psychosomatic chaos. That there is the peace of God that transcends our understanding. That the transubstantiation is we change. Or the probability is that we can change.
I think too. Yes, you're right, 100%. Yeah. I think one of the hiccups with communion in many churches is it's hurried, and I don't mean that when we do it we rush through it and nobody thinks about what's happening. I just mean if you want to make it meaningful, it's really difficult to make something meaningful in 10 minutes. And if you're going to do it every week, or if you're going to, even if you do it once a month, I go, man, if you really want that to be potent, my best advice would be to slow down and script the whole thing out and make the whole service about that experience. I mean, give it the whole hour. Sit in it, soak in it, explore it, experience it. And one of the things I always struggle with at West Winds is I go, I just don't want to do that. There's other things I want to do. There's other ways I want to explore. And for some people that would be really meaningful. For others it wouldn't. I certainly don't feel led by the Holy Spirit to do it like that. I know the arguments from church history, tradition.
You got to look into go back to Europe. You've traveled, go to Europe. You'll find every cathedral at 12 noon. The bells will ring, and they will have a communion service, and it will last for about 30 minutes.
Yeah, and how are they doing in Christianity over there? They're killing it.
Well, there's the
revival.
Yeah, but there's the lunch break. Do you open your church at lunchtime?
No, I don't know if you know this, Andrew, but the church isn't a building. The church is the people. Yeah.
That's a different subject. You have a building. Do you open your building at lunchtime for people on their lunch break to take 30 minutes so it doesn't rob from the Sunday? Yeah. Do you have that? Even if it was 20 people that turned up, do you have that?
No, and I don't think I would do that. I did not. Well, now where our church isn't, and like nobody eats lunch there, so that would be silly.
You mean the building?
Yeah, nobody eats lunch. Yeah, but if I was in a downtown location, I'll tell you my fantasy. This is my real church fantasy, and my wife gets really uncomfortable when I say this. But in my dotage, when I'm old and gray, old and gray. I'm currently young and gray.
Unless you color your beard, which
I love the fantasy of buying a old church building. I mean a small old church building, a little country church maybe, or maybe a little stone chapel. I mean something that's shaped like, here's the church, here's the steeple. That's one room, maybe a restroom out back, but one room seats 30 people. And I want to do church services 7 times a day. I want to observe the breviary every day of the week, and I want to do church services by myself with my turntables, so that I can preach and I can facilitate the experience of God in worship without a band and all the kerfluffle. And so it's me and my turntables and 7 different sermons every day and the Eucharist, and people come in and there's sand on the floor and pews, and we come in barefoot and then we go back out to the beach. Church is 20 or 30 minutes. Maybe 45 minutes. We hang out afterwards. I just love this all day, every day, church services, and it just flows in real life. And I like the frequency with which CrossFit classes are offered. And I like.
There you go.
I miss the small church vibe.
Yeah.
But I don't want to turn my big church into a small church vibe. A thing is what it is, and that thing must be beautified and complexified and glorified and developed, not turned into a different thing entirely. So I really miss having 20 people in my youth group, or 60 or 70 people in my college. I miss like having buddies, and I love that. And I go, great, I can do the music, I'll do the teaching, and if I'm sick, we don't have class that day. I love that. And then if I'm going to go on vacation with my family, well, that just seems so. That's for me. That's that's a beautiful liturgical dream.
Well, with what you said. I was a little hesitant at first with the way you were describing the church and the one room and everything, but then you said sand on the floor, barefoot, and then you come back out to the beach. If you find a stone one room church on a beach,
right.
I'm there.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know, Jill, I know you agree with me, babe.
Yeah.
We are there.
Well, I just think like I love, during COVID, I've been thinking so much about how much church sucks. I've been on sabbatical for a couple of months, and getting ready to go back to work now. And I've been watching a lot of church online, and it's terrible. Church is awful.
Yeah.
And I watch it, and I go, like, the music.
Predictable.
Yeah. Well, the music is dull and lifeless. The preachers are tone deaf. They have no idea what's going on in the real world. The way people dress is goofy. You never go to dinner and see somebody dressed like they are at churches. It's like the fashion designers punch themselves in the eye, see stars, and then try and put a doily on it so they can sell it to church ladies. And it's terrible, terrible. And I just go, if I was going to walk into a church, what would I be going for? I'd be going for transcendence. I'd be going for transfer. I want to experience God.
Well, yeah. So we've been talking about the Eucharist. Yeah. And if we just focus on that, we've missed it. There is so much more that can occur in a liturgical year.
Yeah, right.
If you choose to follow that, which brings the variance and the richness that you're talking about. And, there's always something going down somewhere. I mean, every saint is recognized on some day of the year and their context and what they meant. So here's an example. In October, going back to the way we started as chaplains, we pray for the fire dogs because Francis of Assisi was the patron saint of many things as well as nature. Yeah. And so we do literally say a prayer over the fire dogs that are well trained. And in the communities around Austin, churches have their people bringing their pets, that their pastor, their priest, their minister prays over them. Now, whether you agree or disagree with that, therein is tradition that is not every Sunday, but is an appreciation of creation. Yeah. And I think the liturgical calendar, the deeper you go, there is a richness there that, in my opinion, needs to be mined out again. Yeah. And adapted for a postmodern community using the language and the gestures that we understand today.
What I've discovered over the last 10 years as a pastor, because I agree, but I agree with a twist of lemon, is if you can find something in the great catalog of Christian history and tradition and reintroduce it, people love it.
Yeah.
They love it.
Yeah.
If I find some old thing and I get excited about it, and I pitch it, and I present it in a Dave McDonald way, because they're used to watching the Dave channel, so they get from Dave this cool thing. It feels rooted, it feels substantive, it feels meaningful. You feel like you're caught up in the great cloud of witnesses. I mean, it feels really cool. What I didn't know when I first started exploring like this, because you hear the word liturgy, you hear the words liturgical calendar. For me, I was a liturgical virgin. I didn't know any of that stuff was. You make the mistake, at least I did, of assuming that somewhere there's a liturgical calendar, like an actual calendar that you can flip through and get all this information. No. Yeah. So that's why I tend to use the term Christian history and tradition when I'm talking about the corpus of orthodoxy and orthopraxy, going back to the times of Polycarp, is because you're there. But you can find anything. You want to find werewolves? I got a werewolf saint for you. You want to find satyrs? You want to find magicians? You want to find Christians who are ecologists? You can find anything you want. You could Google saints that cared about sexual identity and gender, and you're going to find plenty on there. You can Google, saints who advocated for the release of oppressed peoples. You're going to find tons. Saints about fashion designers. What does the liturgical calendar have to say about cinema? I mean, you're going to find so much, and that's. I mean, Google's amazing because you can find our history on Google and repurpose it and remix it, and do it in really clever and cool ways. And we did a Blessing of the Animals a couple years ago. I loved it.
So the skill of a pastor, I think, today is to exegete their community, exegete the scripture, and exegete the liturgical depth and breadth of what is available to us that's applicable to how we exegeted our community. You're in Jackson. I'm in Georgetown, Texas, just north of Austin. You're in Bastrop, south of Austin. They are historically and presently very different communities.
Sure.
So for me, what is it to be English here? What is it to be English there? In Austin, to be English is nothing, because you've got a whole bunch of English people and other nations.
It's not ever a thing to be English.
Not since about 1776.
Oh yeah, 1776. That's when we gave you the real estate called the East Coast.
I remember it was a very
King George
friendship
was fed
exchange.
Up of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Even
a
gave you
willing,
bunch of tea, but you threw it overboard, you know. And so I don't know.
ungrateful peasants.
Yeah. July the 4th is a great day of appreciating what England did for you. That's just terrific. Oh, how we see things differently.
No, I interrupted you, but yes, yeah. I think I go. I simplify it, and I say the task is to think about me. You know, who am I? What do I got to work with? What's God saying to me? Them. You know, who is my context? What are they going through? And it. You know, what's God calling us to do right now? When we overlap what it is, and it, I tend to mine from, either some great new idea I have or something I'm going to repurpose. But I go, you, or, me, you, me, them, and it. But yours has better language.
Yeah, but yours is more understandable.
That's never good.
I apologize for my rich English.
Oh man, well let's wrap it up there, man. Thanks you guys for joining us. Great to have you again, and I love having you at the house. The chapter house is such a dream come true, man. How cool that we get to bring people, from all over the world, and every theological background, men, women, old, young, black, white, everybody coming together with very different opinions and very different political stances, and the thing that binds us together is love and friendship.
Yep.
Unity in Jesus, and of course, love you. If you're watching or listening, love you to come to the chapter house, man. We have on-site retreats just about every month. The only time we don't is December, and then we have online courses and cohorts. Cohorts run for 3 months. Online, we meet every other week, and we do ministerial training about creativity, innovation, and change, and a broad variety of different ministry areas. And then courses range on basically all the geeky stuff I'm thinking about. So there's courses on hope, on fear, on happiness, courses on design, courses on sermon writing and crafting, courses on hermeneutical excellence and biblical interpretation. But it's a great thing, man. We want you to become a Fossorian and get over here and get with guys like this and guys like you. So God bless everybody, and we'll see you soon.